Good evening. I'm sorry, I'm going to fix the light. I look a little bit too much like I have a halo. I'm going to turn off this light and turn on another one. Is that better? It's better for me. Hope it's better for you. So we'll begin with the verse of the Kesa. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Tathagata's teaching, freeing all creations. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Tathagata's teaching, freeing all creations. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. I wear the Tathagata's teaching, freeing all creations. The Gata of Atonement. All evil karma ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and thought, now I atone for it all. All evil karma ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and thought, now I atone for it all. All evil karma ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and thought, now I atone for it all. He bows. The fragrance of this incense invites the awakened mind to be present with us now. The fragrance of this incense fills our room, protects and guards our minds from wrong thinking. The fragrance of this incense unites us with precepts, concentration, and insight. We offer it for all beings. Homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. I go to the Buddha for guidance. I shall become one with the Buddha. I resolve that I shall each day follow the way of life he laid down for us to walk. and awaken to his supreme wisdom. I go to the Dharma for guidance. I shall become one with the Dharma. The gates of Dharma are manifold. I vow to enter them all. The goal of wisdom is ever beyond. I shall attain it. I go to the Sangha for guidance. I shall become one with the Sangha. In the spirit of universal fellowship and as a member of the Sangha, I pledge myself to strive for the enlightenment of all beings. The Metta Sutta. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm, and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upward to the skies and downward to the depths, outward and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, sitting or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into the world of suffering. The Metta Prayer. May I be happy and well. May no harm come to me. May I learn compassion. May all my friends, family, and those I love be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all those troubled in body, mind, and spirit be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all those who have hurt me in body, mind, and spirit be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all those I have hurt in body, mind, and spirit be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all my enemies be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. May all living beings be happy and well. May no harm come to them. May they learn compassion. I seem to be more off center than usual tonight. Sorry, having issues tonight. Nothing important. So I'm going to do a guided meditation. Before I do that, I want to mention something. I've noticed that getting a lot more views on Sunday mornings than on Wednesday evening. There could be a number of reasons for that. And I was wondering if part of the reason for it is that Sunday morning shorter. It's more really all about me just giving a Dharma talk. There's not a lot of chanting and stuff. There's also not a meditation. And so it just made me wonder kind of what people are wanting, So if you want something different, let us know. We're not married to what we're doing. We're not attached to this. We want to benefit as many people as we can. So anyway, let us know what your thoughts are. It looks like we're going to continue for some time doing live stream services. In fact, we were going to start back up at White Sands Sunday, but that's not going to happen because of the COVID-19 spike in Florida and concerns about that, White Sands decided to wait till the beginning of August, and which I think was a wise move. I'm disappointed by that, but also relieved. None of us want to be sick. Um, so anyway, this is going to continue for a while. So feel free, to email me, post in the comments or whatever, if there are things that you'd like, things that you think should change or whatever. We're going to change channels before long. I'll give you a heads up on that for a few meetings. It's really about access to our channel. There are other teachers, and so we're going to try to make it more accessible to more teachers so that if something happens and I can't be here, like happened a couple of Wednesdays ago, somebody else can lead the service. Or if somebody wants to lead the service, so I don't have to. We can do that. So anyway, let's do a guided meditation. This particular one, I've been kind of fooling with this a little bit. There's a very, very traditional, very, very Buddhist meditation practice. It's all stuff that comes out of the Pali Canon. And I've been sort of fiddling with ways to make it so that it's you don't have to know quite as much in order to get something out of it, and where if you're maybe not a Buddhist, you just want to learn how to meditate, you don't know if you identify this way yet, or you're practicing another religion, and you want to stick with that, that you can still do this because it's the practice itself is good. So I'm going to kind of guide you through that. It's a little different than I've done in the past because it's a lot less traditional. Just to set this up a little bit, sort of a mini Dharma talk. There's an essay by Dogen that's called Getting the Marrow by Doing Obeisance, basically by bowing. And in there, he talks about finding a teacher. And he says, once you've found a teacher, you should behave very respectfully toward this teacher. You should do obeisance. And he talks about what that is. And he says, and when he's talking about finding a teacher, he doesn't mean finding, somebody like me. He means finding a path, really. Finding a teacher in the sense of the Buddha or Jesus or the Sikh scripture or whatever you see as your teacher on that kind of highest level. In other words, the focal point for the things that give you meaning and purpose and that guide, that your moral compass points at and that kind of thing. That's what he means by a teacher. And then he says, once you do that, you should seek teachings from everything, basically, from rocks and clouds. You should, seek teachings from a pillar, a wall, and a village, and so on. So basically, he's saying once you find a teacher, look everywhere. Find that teacher in everything, right? So I'm going to talk about, usually the tradition in this is to do recollection of the Buddha. So I'm going to change that to recollection of the teacher. And you can use that to mean anything you want. Anyway, let's do it rather than talk about it. And then maybe we'll talk about it a little bit more one of these days. So get in your meditation posture. Take a few deep breaths. And as you exhale, just let everything relax. Let your mind, body start to settle down. And then let your breath become calmer. Just let it settle into a comfortable, natural rhythm. So what we'll do is the guardian meditations. So there are 4 guardians, and this isn't something supernatural or whatever. These are contemplations that help you guard the mind. So you're protecting the mind from really going off into harmful directions or unskillful directions, directions that don't lead to liberation. So these really are ways to set an intention for meditation. And the first guardian is recollection of the teacher. So think of your teacher, whatever your highest teacher is. And what makes this the highest teaching? It should be pure through and through. In other words, nothing in there that leads to harm. So completely compassionate, completely wise, completely calm, serene, and settled. So what is teacher to you? And this is your refuge. This is where you go when your mind becomes unsettled, uncalm, not compassionate, not wise. And the second guardian is love. So not love in the romantic sense, not love in the attachment sense. Love in the sense of phrases like God is love. In Buddhism, we'll often translate this word as loving kindness. It's a heartfelt goodwill. Really the desire for happiness for others. And we can start by developing goodwill for ourselves. If we don't have goodwill for ourselves, it's very hard to have goodwill for others. So as you exhale, you can just let this thought ride on your breath. May I be happy and well. But this means happy right now, not striving for something in the future, not needing things, externals that we think we need. It means right now, sitting here breathing, being happy, and recognizing that in this moment we have well-being. We're not creating stress. Not creating hatred, not creating afflictions. May I be happy and well. And then extend that to all beings in all directions. May all beings be happy and well. And just repeat that to yourself as if you're sending it to the north and south, east and west, above and below. And the third guardian is mindfulness of the body. So where is the body? It's right here. It's right now. You're able to practice because you have a body. If you're going to do anything, you're going to do it because you have a body. The body is not the self. The body is constantly changing. Everything that arises changes. Everything that's made up of other things changes. If you're born, you're going to experience difficulties. But right now we have this body sitting here breathing. Finally, appreciating the value of the present moment. We have this moment. Dogen would say at the end of services, time quickly passes by and opportunity is lost. Each of us must strive to awaken. So what can you do with this moment, with this body, with this love, to awaken to your teacher? So I'll give you a couple moments of silence, with your mind focused by those intentions. Just appreciate this breath, this body, this moment. When you get a chance, let me know how that went for you. Like I said, that was not a traditional way of doing that, but I'm trying to find a way to teach that to people who might benefit from it, but don't want to spend the time studying the stuff in the Pali Canon that you have to know to really understand the traditional version. So I'm going to talk about enlightenment. The reason I'm talking about enlightenment tonight is that somebody asked me a question about it. I think it might have been last Sunday. I can't remember for sure when it was. And I said then that I would return to that soon. So I hope that that person is here tonight, or at least watches these after the fact. It's an interesting topic, enlightenment is. So So sometime back, years ago, when I was doing the Bright Dawn Ministry program, uh, Reverend Kabose was talking about the concept of light and dark, and he told this story about someone's child. He was visiting somebody, and this child had noticed that when his eyes got used to the darkness at nighttime, that he could see some of the things in his room. And he said, there's a lot of light in the darkness. And that struck me. I liked that, partly because it's kind of cute and funny, but it's a good metaphor, I think, for the spiritual journey itself. So, we don't typically begin to progress along a path of practice until we have realized that some element of our lives have gotten kind of dark, right? And then we start to see that there's a light available to us. So the light of hope, the light of love, the light of goodwill, things like that. So if we think back to the story of the Buddha's enlightenment, we see that he began to progress on the path because really he was in pain. He had realized that his life and the lives of his loved ones did or would contain suffering. And he wondered if there was a way to deal with that. And the answer to that question was the awakening that he experienced as the morning star arose after 7 days of meditation at the end of several years of very diligent practice. And so we refer to that awakening as his enlightenment, as sort of bringing light to the darkness of human experience. And by the way, if you're new to this stuff, Buddha means the awakened one, right? So literally, being enlightened and being awakened are the same thing. So, but it's a little confusing, partly because it means different things to different people in different contexts and different Buddhist traditions. And a lot of the time, the people who are talking about enlightenment are not enlightened, and may not really even understand what it means. And then people sometimes wonder if there are enlightened people living today, and even if such a thing as enlightenment still exists. And I understand that, because you can practice for a long time and not feel like you're getting anywhere and start to wonder, am I ever going to wake up? So, but if I didn't think that enlightenment was possible, I wouldn't have become a Buddhist. And I think there are a lot of people around who have at least experienced what we consider a glimpse of awakening. Enough that I think that we can safely say that such a thing exists and that it's a goal worth pursuing, and that we can, if maybe not experience what the Buddha would consider total unbinding, nirvana, total liberation, then we can at least move in that direction. And as a result of that, we can live better lives. And in the process, even if we don't reach a point that we would consider total liberation, we can personally experience some freedom from at least some of the ways that we bind ourselves to our own difficulties, that we tie ourselves to our own stress, our own suffering. So as I said, there's different schools of thought about what enlightenment is and how it happens and what you might do with it if you experience it. In fact, one of the initial rifts in the Sangha happened over the Arahant ideal versus the Bodhisattva ideal. In other words, one should strive to become an Arahant, or should one strive to become an Arahant, a fully liberated being who would not be reborn, but upon dying enter this eternal bliss state of nirvana? Or should one continue to take rebirth as a Bodhisattva, a Buddha to be, in order to help others also become Bodhisattvas? So I think that the awareness that enlightenment is not something that you do by yourself for personal gain, but that enlightenment is something that involves and benefits all beings, I think that that realization is itself an awakening. So the Buddha talked about different stages along the path. And so some traditions hold that awakening is gradual. There are stories, even going back to the early scriptures, though, about monks who had sudden awakenings and that kind of stuff. The Buddha himself didn't get caught up in the idea of sudden enlightenment versus gradual awakening, or worry about whether to become a bodhisattva or an arahant. Here's how he talks about his own enlightenment. He said, before my enlightenment, being myself subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, and suffering, I sought what was subject to birth, aging, sickness, death, and suffering. And then I considered this. Why should I seek what is subject to suffering? Suppose, having understood the danger and what is subject to arising, I seek instead the supreme security of bondage, nirvana. And so when he says, at his moment of awakening, as the morning star arose to herald the seventh night of his meditation, he realized the truth of arising and cessation. And he said, when this is, that is. From the arising of this comes the arising of that. When this isn't, that isn't. From the cessation of this comes the cessation of that. And as this grew clear, ardent, absorbed, he stood, routing the dark troops of Mara like the sun that lights up the sky. So in other words, he realized what caused suffering and what caused liberation. And he stopped doing the things that caused suffering, and that stopped the cessation, the cycle of coming and going that led to stress. So, but then when he talked about what it meant to be enlightened, he spoke in terms of 7 specific factors: mindfulness, keen investigation of the Dharma, effort, happiness, calm, concentration, and equanimity. So it's interesting, when people talk about enlightenment, they usually talk about it as something that sort of happens to you. You know, you practice and practice and practice, and then suddenly one day, boom, you're enlightened. But if you look at it in these terms, it's really more like something you do. It's kind of more a way you live. So mindfulness, you know, this word mindfulness gets tossed around a lot in different contexts, Buddhist and secular. It means being aware of what's going on in the present moment, but that doesn't mean that it's enough to just be in the moment. You also need to be aware of what you're doing mentally, verbally, and physically, and to awaken to the full impact and importance of your actions. In other words, remembering I should be doing things that lead to liberation, not doing things that lead to suffering, and being aware of what you're doing and where they're going. And so this is kind of the light that shines in the darkness, this realization that we don't have to continue to make ourselves and others unhappy. We can retrain the mind, and by working with our attention more skillfully, which is another way of looking at enlightenment, at mindfulness, you know, we can change the amount of suffering we experience. So the second one, keen investigation of the dharmas. So dharma has different meanings, and often when you hear this word, we're using it to refer to the teachings of the Buddha. When I say the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, we mean the teacher, the teaching, and those who practice the teaching together. But dharma also means phenomena. So by keen investigation of the dharma, we also mean understanding reality as it is, which means we can look deeply into phenomena and understand that everything is constantly changing and all phenomena are subject to causes, conditions, and effects. And so one of the first things we have to do is stop clinging to the way that we define ourself and the self of others and the goodness or badness of things and conditions. So keen investigation of the Dharma in part means to stop judging things as relative to us and to see things directly. And at the same time, it means understanding reality and how it applies to us, right? So you can listen to me talk and you can memorize this talk if you want to, but that doesn't mean you're really understanding the Dharma. How does these 7 factors of enlightenment, how are they going to lead to your awakening? How are you going to put these into practice and live them in a way that you live an enlightened life? So, but anyway, one of the elements of that is that we stop judging things and conditions and even ourselves and the selves of others as good or bad, and we just see things as they are. This is suchness. So let me try to bring that down to earth. I read a talk by one of the Thai masters some time back. I think it was Ajahn Chah. He was very good at talking to Westerners and bringing things down to earth. And one of his followers had given him a thermos bottle, and so he was using this thermos bottle as an example. And he points out, he said, if we like it, it doesn't react, and it doesn't say anything. The liking is all on our side. Even if we hate it and throw it out into the woods, it still doesn't react. It doesn't respond to us because it's just the way it is. We like it or dislike it because of our own attachment. The view that it's good squeezes our heart. The view that it's no good squeezes our heart. So in other words, the judging is what's going to, I like that term, squeeze our heart. Doesn't that kind of give you that sense of, you felt that, that you judged something, you felt like it was gripping you in the chest in a really unpleasant way, right? So, so our heart is responding to our judgment, not to the thing. So if we're deciding to judge something good, bad, or indifferent, we're engaging in this process that really is not worth doing. And people get hung up on the idea of non-attachment, thinking it means indifference, but it really doesn't mean indifference. It really means non-judging. So why does anything, a person, an inanimate object, or a condition, or whatever, need to be judged? Well, it doesn't. Like the monk's thermos bottle, things don't react to our judging of them, generally. They do what they do. They are what they are. And so the judging is really all on our side. So part of this process of living an enlightened life means to understand that and to try to practice with it. Now that I've said that, you're going to go out and not judge anything ever, right? Of course not. You're going to, because you are the way you are too, right? So it's a practice. So we have to put it into practice and live with it. We love things or hate things. If we get disturbed, it's our doing. It's the same with our bodies, our minds, and our moods, and all of that. We should see these things as impermanent, as not self, as stressful, and that's it. So we drop the judgments because it's just not worth the effort. So sometimes people will hear something like that and think Buddhism is very negative. This idea that everything arises from causes and conditions, and therefore subject to stress and is impermanent and all that, seems on the surface to be pessimistic. But when you think about it, it's just being realistic. Look at these flowers. So I had to redo them today because actually the ones that were on my altar got very wilted. And so I took out the wilted ones, and I had put about half of the flowers that I bought on the kitchen table. I bought these for an event last week. And so I was changing out the wilted flowers so that they'd all look fresh tonight. But they're not going to look fresh by this time next week, right? We know that a flower is going to look like this for a fairly brief time, and then it's going to start to wilt because it's inconstant. I can order it to not wilt, and it will wilt anyway, right? No amount of deciding what I think that flower should do is going to change what that flower does. So I bought the flowers and I paid for them, but they're not really mine, are they? I can't make them not decay. I can't decide what they're going to do. They're going to become compost no matter what I think. And if I expect them to be otherwise, it's going to be stressful. If I can accept them the way they are, though, I can appreciate their beauty right now, and I can appreciate their value as fertilizer for the next season's flowers after they've composted. So there's a saying in Japanese Buddhism, when you're enlightened, the trees and rocks are enlightened too. So there's a little bit more light in the darkness. There's stress and inconstancy and all of that, but there's also beauty. And that beauty exists largely because of the stress and inconstancy. So next time you chant the Heart Sutra and you get to the part where it says Nirvana is already here, or you read one of these sutras where it says Samsara is Nirvana, that's what it's talking about. If the days didn't get shorter as the earth moved around the sun, then they wouldn't get longer. The growing season didn't end, there wouldn't be any compost for the next one, and so on. So the third factor is effort or energy. And this really means living in a way where you put your energy toward your liberation. The Buddha revealed a path. His example serves as an object of faith and as a refuge. Um, but you know, he said, "Be islands unto yourselves, be your own refuge." So it's up to us to travel the path. Enlightenment includes the ongoing effort of eradicating harmful thoughts that have arisen, preventing the arising of harmful thoughts, developing thoughts that are good and helpful, and promoting the growth of the good that already exists, right? So if you put it in context of the meditation we did earlier, you know, you're guarding your mind against distractions, and you're developing, largely by developing awarenesses that are skillful. So this means we have to not only be mindful and understand what's going on, but we need to be diligent. Think about if you know the story of the Buddha's enlightenment. You know, when he sat down beneath the tree, he said, "My blood may dry up and my bones crumble to dust, but I won't rest until I have awakened." And so we do these two things. We abandon the ways that we create difficulties for ourselves, and we cultivate ways that we create happiness for ourselves. And we do that diligently. So the fourth factor of enlightenment is kind of a surprise to a lot of people when they hear it. It's happiness. There's different translations. It's a Pali word, piti, refers to joy, rapture, things like that. So we tend to think of happiness as something that happens to us or arises because we get what we want. So, if I got enlightened, I'd be really happy. No, if you live happily, you are enlightened. Okay, so happiness is really something that we do. We cultivate it by learning to recognize the difference between pleasure and true happiness. Pleasant feelings are momentary and fleeting. You should enjoy them, but don't let your happiness depend on externals. So when we practice and we experience pleasure as a result of practice, we're likely to practice more, right? If you just practice and it was like all really hard and all this diligence and effort and mindfulness and crap, and it didn't feel good, you wouldn't do it, right? So one of the factors of awakening is that as you do it, it feels better. And that's an important part of the process. But we also learn that our happiness isn't something that is dependent on something outside of ourselves. I had this epiphany one day. I probably have talked about this. Some of you have heard this story before. I had this epiphany when I was waiting in the line at the deli at the supermarket. And the guy making the subs was really kind of slow, and there were a bunch of people in line. And I'm sitting there feeling very happy. I'm going to get a sub, and it's one that I'm going to like, and and it's feeling good, and have a health, and all those things. I wasn't thinking about all that stuff. I was just standing there in line feeling happy. And then I look around, and I realize everybody else is just miserable because this guy's slow. Wow, why didn't he hurry up? And all that kind of stuff. It's really a matter of what you're paying attention to. And so looking at that, I go, oh, you know what? This Buddhism stuff is working. I'm feeling actually pretty good about life right now. So calmness and concentration are the fifth and sixth factor of enlightenment. So they're very closely related. Calmness comes about because you have an orderly mind, and concentration lets you maintain that calm even when the world around you is chaotic. Right? So calmness kind of arises as a result of concentration. And the calmer you get, the more you can concentrate and the more focused you can be on what you need to be focused on. So to concentrate means to steady the mind. If you're calm, it's easier to concentrate. If you concentrate, it's easier to be calm. So once the mind calms down, there are fewer distractions, concentration deepens, and you're able to access states of mind that are not readily available when you're stressed out a lot. And not only that, but you learn, by practicing concentration, you learn how to work skillfully with your attention, which improves your experience of life and whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, whether you're focused on your highest purpose or whether you're just being reactive, and so on. And then the final factor of enlightenment is equanimity, which means to be able to encounter the changes and difficulties of life without losing your balance. The mind becomes kind of like a gyroscope. Did you ever have a gyroscope when you were a kid? That was popular when I was a kid. And you get this thing to spin, and then no matter what, you could balance it on the palm of your hand, and no matter what you did, it would stay upright. And that's kind of what equanimity is. If the mind has that level of engagement, then no matter what happens, it can stay upright, it can stay balanced. Equanimity doesn't mean indifference. It means that we can accept what happens. We can understand karma, action, and how that comes into play, and understand cause and effect and see reality as it is, and we can adapt. We don't have to get hung up on the shoulds and shouldn'ts and all that kind of stuff and create stress and disturbance for ourselves. So, if you have an awakening, which happens sometimes, people will have this aha moment where the Dharma suddenly lights up the darkness a little bit, that kind of thing. Then what do you do? So I told this story, I think when I answered the question about enlightenment the other day, but I'll repeat it here in this context because it's really a good one. You know, what happens when you wake up? And years ago, I had a sort of maybe a little tentative awakening experience. This was before I had a teacher or anything, though. And so it kind of freaked me out. It scared me. I didn't know what to do. I was afraid that if I went with it, that nothing would mean anything to me, and I'd have to end up sitting in a tree playing the flute all day or something like that. I don't know what would happen, but there were things in my life at the time that were significant to me, and I was afraid that I wasn't going to care about them. So there's this Zen story about a young monk who's on the brink of realization, and his master recognizes this, but this monk is having trouble making the breakthrough that he needs to make. So the monastery happens to be at the base of a mountain, and the master tells him, go up to the top of the mountain and don't come down until you're enlightened. So the monk gathers up a few things that he's going to need to stay up there for a while and dutifully begins walking up this steep, narrow trail toward the mountaintop. And as he's struggling up this narrow path, he encounters an old man coming down the other way. The old man is carrying a bundle of sticks on his shoulder. And so they kind of try to jockey around each other to let each other pass, and they decide together at this point that this would be a good time and place to stop and take a little rest. So it turns out that this old man happened to be a fully enlightened bodhisattva. And so, you know, he knows what's going on. So he asks this young monk, where are you going? And the monk explains his conversation with his master and says, you know, I've got to go up to the mountaintop and all that, tells his story. And then they get ready to go back on their separate ways, and they're standing up. The old guy puts his sticks on his shoulder, and the monk picks up his bowl and stuff. And they start to go away, and the monk goes, hey, what do you think of this enlightenment thing anyway? Well, in that moment, the old man just drops his bundle of sticks, and they scatter on the trail. And at that moment when that happens, the monk realizes that to free himself, he just has to let go of what he's clinging to. And he thinks this one word, released, and he's awakened. So they both stand there for a moment, kind of staring at each other, kind of basking in this sudden realization. And then the monk says, okay, I'm enlightened. What do I do now? The bodhisattva just quietly gathers up the sticks, puts them back on his shoulder, and continues down the trail toward the village. So this is what you do when you wake up. You know, there's this concept that you encounter, the idea of Buddha nature. The goal of practice is to reveal this innate quality, this true nature, as if it's some mystical inner quality that's been mysteriously hidden from sight. All you have to do is uncover it and you're good to go. But really, what does this mean? It means, Buddha nature really means that we can wake up, and we can wake up by practicing Buddhism. And wake up by putting the teachings into practice. That is your Buddha nature. Up, shaft of light comes down, kind of awakening. Probably. You might have one of those. It's simply the awareness that we have the freedom, moment by moment, choice by choice, cause less difficulty for ourselves and others, and to live more fully, more authentically, to pick up our sticks and go on down the path, really with complete uh, immersion in our life. So when you've awakened to that, well, anyway, like that old monk, you just keep going. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about. So there's a bazillion other things you could say about enlightenment. Uh, you know, but I wanted to share with you some of the thoughts that I've had, um, and things that I find helpful, and hopefully they were helpful to you. So it looks like we might have a couple of questions. So let me see what you have asked me. Oh, okay. Jeff says it was Ellen that asked about enlightenment. I thought it was Ellen. I thought about going back and looking. Anyway, I'm glad that you're there and that you've listened and that you've heard this. So you're welcome. And I see Brandon said something and took it back. I don't know. I have never seen that message retracted thing before. So hi, Brandon. Glad you're here. Are there any other questions? So I guess not. So I think I mentioned this before. I'll mention it again just in case somebody came in late. I had said last week that services would return to White Sands. Services are not returning to White Sands yet. So I will be here Sunday to give a Dharma talk. And it looks like this might last for a while, so I might just go ahead and rearrange my office a little bit to make it a little bit more conducive to what I do in here. So it may look different next time a little bit. But thank you very much for being here. And I appreciate you taking the time. And I'll see you Sunday. Buddha nature pervades the whole universe, existing right here now, and offering flowers, candles, and incense, hearing the Dharma and training the mind, great merit is attained. We dedicate this merit to the great Master Shakyamuni Buddha, the all-pervading and everlasting three treasures, the 16 guardians and all protectors of the Dharma and their relations throughout space and time, to all ancestors of the Sangha and all beings in the Dharma world. May penetrating light dispel the darkness of ignorance. Let all karma be resolved in the mind flower bloom in eternal spring. May the Dharma body maintain strength and health, and years of life be lengthened for all teachers of this Sangha. May their vows be fully realized. May they live in perfect peace with Buddha Dharma. We pray for all those suffering from violence and those who grieve for them, for those living in oppression, for all who are imprisoned who should be free, for all refugees from violence, hunger, catastrophes, man-made or natural. We pray for the health and well-being of those suffering from diseases of body, mind, or spirit, all those working toward the healing of those afflictions. We pray for those suffering from COVID-19 and those working to protect them and treat them, and to those grieving for those lost to this pandemic. At this time, we have members of our congregations who are grieving for lost loved ones. We pray for them, send loving thoughts their way. I don't like to say names of people online, but some of you go to White Sands, you know these people. So take a moment to hold them in your heart. May they be serene through all their troubles, and may we realize the enlightened way together. Sabe sata sadahantu avera sukhajivino katam punya phalam maham sabe bhagi bhavantu te. May all beings always live happily, free from animosity. May all share in the blessings that spring from the good we have done. Vows. And thank you.